The homeless woman sitting outside his luxury office building every morning shouldn't have caught his attention. But Jade Campbell had a way of laughing at the sky that made Dominic Young pause mid-stride every single time. She sat on a piece of cardboard with a mangy terrier curled in her lap, and while most people in her position looked defeated, she seemed to find joy in the smallest things. A bird landing nearby, the warmth of morning sun, the way her dog's tail wagged when someone actually made eye contact. Dominic had built a pharmaceutical empire worth $3 billion by the age of 35, yet he couldn't remember the last time he had smiled at something as simple as sunshine. "Good morning, Mr. Young," his assistant chirped as he entered the marble lobby. He nodded absently, his mind still on the woman outside. Her clothes were layered and mismatched, her dark hair tangled, but her eyes held a light that seemed impossible given her circumstances. The board meeting that morning dragged on for 3 hours. Dominic listened to shareholders debate profit margins and market expansion while his coffee grew cold. He had everything he had ever worked for: the penthouse apartment overlooking the city, the fleet of luxury cars, the respect and fear of everyone in the pharmaceutical industry. Yet sitting in that temperature-controlled conference room, he felt absolutely nothing. When he finally escaped back to his office, he found himself at the window, looking down at the street below. She was still there, now sharing what looked like a sandwich with her dog, breaking off small pieces and talking to the animal like it could understand every word. Something in his chest tightened. "Sir, your 2 o'clock is here," his assistant announced through the intercom. Dominic turned away from the window. "Give me 5 minutes." Instead of reviewing the contract on his desk, he grabbed his suit jacket and headed for the elevator. His security detail straightened as he passed, but he waved them off. "Stay here. I will be right back." The September air hit him as he exited the building. He walked the half-block to where she sat, and up close, he could see she was younger than he had initially thought, probably late 20s. Her eyes were green, startlingly bright against her dirt-smudged face. "Hi there," she said, not asking for anything, just greeting him like a neighbor. "Hello." Dominic felt awkward, uncertain. He negotiated billion-dollar deals without hesitation, but standing before this homeless woman, he didn't know what to say. "I see you out here often." "I see you too," she replied, scratching behind her dog's ears. "Always in a hurry, important places to be, I guess. What's your name, Jade? This is Pepper." She held up the dog's paw in a wave. "What's yours, Dominic?" He didn't add his last name, didn't mention his company. "Are you hungry?" She studied him for a moment, probably trying to figure out his angle. "I'm always hungry, but Pepper's eaten, so that's what matters." "There's a deli 2 blocks over. Would you like to get something?" Jade looked surprised. "You're asking me to lunch." "I'm asking if you want food." She stood up slowly, Pepper tucked under one arm, and Dominic realized she was taller than he had expected, probably 5'9" to his 6'2". "Okay, but I should warn you, I probably smell pretty bad." "I don't care." The deli owner's expression when they entered was one Dominic caught and didn't like, but his presence in a $3,000 suit seemed to smooth things over. Jade ordered a modest turkey sandwich. Dominic told her to get whatever she wanted. She added soup and a cookie, then looked at him like he might take it back. They sat at a corner table and she ate slowly, deliberately, like someone who had learned not to waste a single bite. Pepper sat at her feet, well-behaved despite having no leash. "How long have you been on the streets?" Dominic asked. 2 years, give or take. Lost my apartment after I lost my job. It's one of those spiral things, you know. Can't get a job without an address, can't get an address without money, can't get money without a job. She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "What did you do?" "Before. I was a veterinary technician. I loved it, loved the animals, loved helping them. She smiled down at Pepper. That's actually how I got this guy. Someone brought him in to be euthanized because he had a broken leg and they didn't want to pay for surgery. I took him home instead, maxed out my credit card for the operation, worth every penny. Dominic felt something stir in him, something that had been dormant for years. That's why you feed him first, always. Her eyes met his, fierce and certain. He depends on me. I won't let him down. They talked for another hour. Jade told him about growing up in foster care, about aging out of the system at 18 with nothing but a bus ticket and determination. She had put herself through technical school, had been building a life, and then her landlord sold the building and she couldn't afford the rent increase anywhere else. Medical debt from a prior illness had destroyed her credit. The safety net had holes, and she had fallen through every single one. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you do in that fancy building?" "I run a pharmaceutical company." Her eyebrows shot up. "So you're rich?" "Yes, must be nice. It's comfortable." "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly. "I just meant must be nice not to worry. About where you will sleep, what you will eat, if you will make it through winter." Dominic had never worried about those things, not since he was a teenager working 3 jobs to put himself through college after his parents died. He had forgotten what that fear felt like. It is. "And I'm sorry that you have to," Jade shrugged. "I'm tougher than I look, and I've got Pepper. We take care of each other." When they left the deli, Dominic pulled out his wallet. Jade stepped back. "I don't want your money." "Why not?" "Because you bought me lunch. That's enough." "I don't want to be your charity case." "What if I want to help?" "Then help someone who wants it." She wasn't angry, just firm. "I appreciate the meal, really, but I'm not looking for a handout." Dominic watched her walk away, Pepper trotting beside her, and he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt humbled. The next morning she was back in her spot. Dominic walked past, stopped, turned around. "Coffee?" Jade looked up at him, surprised. "Are you going to make this a habit, maybe?" "Then yes. Coffee sounds good." It became a routine. Every morning, Dominic would stop and bring Jade coffee and a breakfast sandwich. They would talk for 15 minutes before he headed into the office. She told him about the other homeless people in the area, the dangerous ones and the kind ones. She told him about the shelters, how some were safe and some weren't, how she often slept in a church doorway because at least there she didn't have to worry about Pepper being stolen. She told him about her dreams, about wanting to work with animals again someday, about the mobile vet clinic. She fantasized about running to help people who couldn't afford care for their pets. He told her about his company, about the pressure of keeping thousands of employees working, about the constant battle between profit and doing what was right. He told her about losing his parents when he was 19, about building his business from nothing, about the loneliness that came with success. "You have everything," Jade said one morning, a month into their routine. "How can you be lonely?" Having people around isn't the same as connecting with them. Everyone wants something. A job, an investment, a favor. No one just wants to know me. "I want to know you," she said quietly. "And I don't want anything except maybe these breakfast sandwiches, which are really good." Dominic smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I want to know you too." As October arrived and the weather turned colder, Dominic noticed Jade's clothes getting heavier, more worn. She was preparing for winter, and the thought of her sleeping outside when snow fell made him physically ill. "Let me get you a hotel room," he said one morning, "just for the winter." "No, Jade, you will freeze." "People like me don't freeze because people like you exist," she said, not unkindly. "We find ways, we survive, we always have. That's not good enough. It's my reality." She looked at him steadily. "I know you mean well, but accepting that much from you, it changes things. It makes me dependent, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that I can only depend on myself. And Pepper, she smiled. And Pepper. Dominic went home that night to his penthouse and couldn't stop thinking about her. He lay in his king-sized bed with its 1,000-thread-count sheets and stared at the ceiling, imagining Jade curled up in a doorway with only a dog and cardboard between her and the concrete. It was unacceptable. He started researching homeless services, shelters, programs. Everything had waiting lists or requirements she couldn't meet. The more he learned, the angrier he became. How was this acceptable? How did people just walk past her every day and do nothing? The realization that he had been one of those people until recently made him feel sick. In early November, Dominic made a decision. He called his real estate agent. "I need a small apartment, nothing fancy. 1-bedroom, safe neighborhood, allows pets. I need it within the week." 3 days later, he had keys. He found Jade at her usual spot, though it was raining and she had a tarp pulled over herself and Pepper. She looked miserable. "Come with me," Dominic said. "Where?" "I want to show you something." She hesitated, then stood, bundling her few possessions into a backpack. He led her to his car and she stopped. "That's a Bentley." "It's a car." "That's like saying the Mona Lisa is a painting." But she got in, Pepper on her lap, and Dominic drove across town to a modest building in a quiet neighborhood. He led her upstairs to apartment 4B and unlocked the door. Inside was a furnished 1-bedroom apartment. Nothing luxurious, but clean and warm and safe. There was food in the refrigerator, dog supplies in the corner, and a bed with fresh sheets. Jade stood in the doorway, frozen. "What is this? A place to live?" "Dominic, I told you I couldn't accept this. It's not charity, it's a job." He had thought this through. "I need someone to manage a project for me, an outreach program for homeless pet owners. You would coordinate with shelters, vets, distribute supplies. You know the community, you know animals. You're qualified. The salary is $40,000 a year, which includes this apartment as part of the compensation package." She turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "You're making this up." "I'm not. The program is real. I funded it last week. I need someone to run it, and you're the best person for the job." "Why are you doing this?" Dominic stepped closer to her, close enough to see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "Because you deserve better than a doorway. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met. Because for the first time in 10 years, I look forward to my mornings, and it's because of you." Jade was crying openly now. Pepper whined and licked her hand. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you will take the job. This is too much. It's not enough." Dominic reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "Jade, you've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. You've reminded me what it feels like to care about something beyond profit margins. Let me do this. Please." She looked around the apartment again, at the warm lights and clean floors, at the bed and the kitchen and the bathroom where she could shower in private for the first time in 2 years. Then she looked back at him, and her smile was brighter than the sun. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes. I will take the job." Dominic felt relief flood through him, followed immediately by something else, something deeper and more complicated. He was falling for her. Maybe he already had fallen. Standing in that apartment, watching her hug her dog and cry with joy, he knew with absolute certainty that Jade Campbell had changed his life. The first month was an adjustment. Jade threw herself into the outreach program with a passion that amazed everyone at the company. She knew exactly what homeless pet owners needed because she had been one. She coordinated with veterinary clinics to provide free basic care. She set up distribution points for pet food and supplies. She created a database of pet-friendly shelters and worked to increase their capacity. She was tireless, dedicated, and brilliant. Dominic watched her blossom. With regular meals and sleep, she filled out, her face losing its gaunt quality. Her hair, clean and brushed, fell in glossy waves past her shoulders. She started wearing clothes that fit, though she shopped at thrift stores and bargain outlets, stretching her salary as far as it would go. "You know you can afford better," Dominic said one day when he stopped by her apartment, ostensibly to check on the program but really just to see her. "I'm saving," she replied, pepper sprawled across her lap as she worked on her laptop at the small kitchen table. "I've got 2 years of nothing to make up for. I want an emergency fund. I want security." "That's smart. That's survival." She looked up at him, and something in her gaze made his heart skip. "Thank you, again. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it every time. You don't have to thank me." "I do, though. You saved my life, Dominic." He sat down across from her. "You saved mine, too. You just don't realize it." "How did I save the billionaire?" she asked, but she was smiling. "You reminded me why I got into this business in the first place. When my mom got sick, we couldn't afford her medications. I watched her die because pharmaceutical companies priced their drugs beyond what ordinary people could pay. I swore I would change that, but somewhere along the way I forgot. I got caught up in markets and shares and expansion. You reminded me that there are real people affected by what I do." Jade reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time they had touched since that day in the apartment, and the contact sent electricity through his entire body. "Then I'm glad I could help," she said softly. They started spending more time together outside of work. Dinners at casual restaurants where Jade felt comfortable. Walks in the park with Pepper. Movies at the discount theater because Jade refused to let him pay $20 a ticket for the luxury cinema. She introduced him to food trucks and hole-in-the-wall ethnic restaurants he never would have found on his own. He showed her art galleries and took her to a symphony where she cried during a violin solo because it was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. "I'm not good at your world," she admitted one evening as they left a charity gala where Dominic had been obligated to make an appearance. She had looked stunning in a simple black dress from a consignment shop, but she had been uncomfortable all night, surrounded by people wearing jewels worth more than most people's houses. "You were perfect," Dominic said. "I used the wrong fork for the salad." And I had no idea what anyone was talking about when they discussed their vacation homes and yacht clubs. Neither did I half the time. That's not my world either, Jade. It's just where my money puts me. But you fit there. I'm just pretending. Dominic stopped walking and turned to face her. They were on the sidewalk outside the hotel where the gala had been held, city lights glittering around them. "I've been pretending my entire adult life, pretending I'm not lonely, pretending I'm satisfied, pretending that success is the same as happiness." "You're the first real thing I've had in years." Jade looked up at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Dominic, what are we doing?" "What do you mean? This, us. We are from completely different worlds. You're a billionaire. I was homeless 6 months ago. We don't make sense." "We make perfect sense." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, letting his fingers linger against her cheek. "You balance me. You ground me. When I'm with you, I'm not a CEO or a billionaire. I'm just Dominic, just a man. That's all I want to be. And when I'm with you, I remember that I'm more than my circumstances, that I have value beyond survival." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I think I'm falling in love with you." Dominic's heart stopped, then started again, beating so hard he was sure she could hear it. "I know I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I already have." He kissed her then, on the sidewalk outside the luxury hotel, and it was nothing like the polished, passionless kisses he had shared with the women in his social circle. This was raw and real and full of emotion. Jade kissed him back like he was oxygen and she had been drowning, her hands fisting in his tuxedo jacket. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jade laughed. "Well, that happened." "That happened," Dominic agreed, and he was grinning like an idiot and he didn't care. They started officially dating, though Dominic knew the optics were complicated. His assistant raised eyebrows. His board members questioned whether it was appropriate for him to date someone technically on the company payroll. His lawyer suggested it could be seen as a power imbalance. "Then I will step down from the program," Jade said when he told her about the concerns. "I don't want to cause problems for you. Absolutely not. You've built something incredible. I'm not letting corporate politics destroy it." Dominic called an emergency board meeting and addressed the issue head-on. "Jade Campbell runs a program I fund, but she doesn't report to me. She's not in my chain of command. Our relationship is personal and has no bearing on her professional work. If anyone has an issue with that, they're welcome to voice it now." Silence. "Good, moving on." After the meeting, his longtime friend and CFO Marcus pulled him aside. "You're really serious about her." "I am. She's not like the others. I know. That's why I love her." Marcus studied him for a long moment, then clapped him on the shoulder. "Good for you, man. It's about time you found someone who makes you human again." As winter settled in, Dominic and Jade's relationship deepened. She met the few friends he had, people who had known him since before the money. They loved her immediately, drawn to her authenticity and warmth. He met the people she had known on the streets, and he was humbled by their resilience and community. They looked out for each other in ways that put wealthy society to shame. "I want to do more," Dominic said one night as they lay tangled together in her bed, Pepper snoring at their feet. "The pet program is amazing, but it's not enough. There are so many people who need help." "You can't save everyone," Jade said, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I can try." "You can. But you have to be smart about it. Systems are broken. You have to fix systems, not just treat symptoms." Over the following weeks, Jade helped him understand the complexities of homelessness in ways he never had before. It wasn't about laziness or addiction, though those could be factors. It was about affordable housing and health care and mental health services, and a minimum wage that hadn't kept pace with cost of living. It was about a society that criminalized poverty instead of addressing its root causes. Together, they developed a comprehensive program. Dominic funded a Housing First initiative, providing apartments with support services. He created a jobs training program within his company, hiring people directly from shelters and paying them fair wages with benefits. He pressured other CEOs in his circle to do the same. Some refused, some joined him. Change was slow, but it was happening. "You're going to make a lot of powerful people uncomfortable," Jade warned him. "Good. They should be uncomfortable. I was comfortable and I was useless." On a cold February evening, nearly a year after he had first bought her lunch, Dominic took Jade back to the deli where they had sat together that first day. It looked exactly the same, worn linoleum and fluorescent lights, but everything else had changed. "Why are we here?" Jade asked, though she was smiling. "Because this is where I started to wake up," Dominic said. "This is where you told me about your life and I realized how much I had taken for granted. This is where everything began." They ordered sandwiches and sat at the same corner table. Dominic was nervous, more nervous than he had been for any business negotiation or public speech. "Jade, this past year has been the best of my life. You've challenged me, changed me, made me want to be better. You see me, really see me, not my money or my position. Just me." "Dominic, what are you doing?" He slid out of the booth and dropped to one knee. The deli went silent. Jade's hands flew to her mouth. "I'm asking you to marry me," he said, pulling out a ring. It wasn't the massive diamond his wealth could easily afford. It was a simple gold band with a small emerald, the color of her eyes. I know we come from different places. I know our lives haven't followed the same path. But I also know that you complete me in ways I didn't even know I was incomplete. You're my opposite in all the best ways, and together we make sense. So please, Jade Campbell, will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face. The entire deli was watching, but she didn't seem to notice. Yes. God, yes. Dominic slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her as the deli erupted in applause. The owner brought them free dessert. An elderly couple at another table shared congratulations. It was perfect because it was real. No polished wedding proposal at an expensive restaurant. Just the two of them in the place where their story had begun. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony. Dominic's friends and colleagues mixed with Jade's friends from the streets and her co-workers from the outreach program. His lawyer almost had a heart attack over the prenup negotiations until Dominic told him there wouldn't be one. "Are you insane?" the lawyer demanded. "She could take half of everything. I don't care, I trust her. Jade had actually been the one to suggest a prenup. I don't want anyone thinking I married you for money." "Anyone who thinks that doesn't know you at all," Dominic had replied. "We are partners, equals. What's mine is yours." "Then what's mine is yours," she had said, grinning. "You now own half of a 7-year-old terrier and a collection of thrift store clothes. Congratulations." The wedding was beautiful in its simplicity. Jade wore a vintage dress that had cost $200. Dominic wore a suit he already owned. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to challenge each other, support each other, and never forget where they had come from. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The reception was at a community center Dominic had funded, the same one that housed the offices for Jade's outreach program. They served food from local restaurants, and the playlist was a mix of everything from classical to hip-hop. Dominic danced with his bride under string lights, and he had never been happier. "Mrs. Young," he murmured against her ear. "How does that feel? Strange. Good. Like putting on shoes that fit perfectly but you have never worn before." She pulled back to look at him. "How does it feel to be married to a formerly homeless woman? Like I finally did something right." Their first year of marriage was an adventure in compromise. Jade moved into Dominic's penthouse, but insisted on redecorating to make it feel less like a showroom and more like a home. She filled it with plants and second-hand furniture and photographs of them together. Dominic loved coming home to the organized chaos, to a space that felt lived in and loved. "Your minimalist aesthetic was depressing," she told him when he found her arranging throw pillows on the couch. "I'm starting to realize that." They traveled, but not to luxury resorts. Jade wanted to see national parks and small towns and places where real people lived real lives. Dominic discovered he loved camping, though he drew the line at not having access to a shower for more than 2 days. "You're such a billionaire," Jade teased him as he complained about sleeping on the ground. "I contain multitudes," he replied. "I can appreciate both a 5-star hotel and the beauty of nature, but my back appreciates the hotel more." They laughed constantly. That was what struck their friends the most, how much joy they found in each other. Dominic had always been serious, driven, intense. With Jade, he was lighter. He made jokes. He played with Pepper. He took afternoons off to surprise her with picnics in the park. Jade, who had been so careful, so guarded, opened up completely. She was affectionate and playful and brilliantly creative. Her outreach program expanded to 3 cities, and she was in talks to take it nationwide. She was featured in magazines and news programs, the formerly homeless woman now helping others escape the streets. She handled the attention with grace, always redirecting the focus to the people she served rather than her own story. "You're amazing," Dominic told her after watching her give a presentation to a group of potential donors. She had been confident and passionate, and every person in the room had pledged funding by the end. "I'm just doing what makes sense," she said. "These are solvable problems. We just have to care enough to solve them." 2 years into their marriage, they started talking about children. Jade was nervous. "What if I'm not a good mother? I never had an example to follow." "You have the biggest heart of anyone I know. You will be an incredible mother." "What if I mess them up?" "Then we will mess them up together, and we will love them through it." Their daughter was born on a rainy April morning. They named her Hope Campbell Young, and she had Jade's green eyes and Dominic's dark hair. Holding her for the first time, Jade cried. "What's wrong?" Dominic asked, concerned. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I just never thought I could have this. A family, a home, a life." She looked up at him, their baby cradled between them. "You gave me all of this." "We gave it to each other," he corrected gently. "You saved me just as much as I saved you." Parenthood suited them. Dominic was hands-on in ways that shocked his colleagues, leaving meetings for doctor appointments and turning down evening commitments to be home for bedtime. Jade was patient and loving, singing to Hope and reading endless stories. Pepper appointed himself the baby's guardian, sleeping under her crib and alerting them to every sound. When Hope was 6 months old, they moved out of the penthouse into a house with a yard. Jade had wanted space for Hope to play, and Dominic had wanted her to have whatever made her happy. The house was in a normal neighborhood, expensive but not ostentatious. They had neighbors who borrowed sugar and kids who played in the street. It was exactly what they both wanted. "We have come a long way from that first morning," Jade said one evening as they sat on their back porch, watching Hope toddle around the grass while Pepper supervised. "We have," Dominic agreed, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, joining this world?" "Never." "Do you regret taking a chance on a homeless woman?" "Not for a single second." He kissed her temple. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, you and Hope." "We are pretty great," she said, grinning. Their second daughter arrived 2 years later, and they named her Grace. Where Hope was cautious and thoughtful, Grace was fearless and loud. Together, the girls were a force of nature, and their parents loved every chaotic moment. Dominic scaled back his role at the company, moving into a chairman position and letting others handle the day-to-day operations. He wanted to be present for his family, and he had the resources to make that choice. He and Jade worked together on their foundation, which had expanded beyond homeless services to include affordable housing development, healthcare access, and education programs. "We are trying to fix the world," Jade said one night after a particularly long day of meetings. "We are trying to fix our corner of it," Dominic replied. "That's all anyone can do." "You think it's enough?" "I think we are making a difference." "I think the people whose lives we have changed would say it's enough. And I think we are teaching our daughters that they have a responsibility to use whatever advantages they have to help others. That's a legacy I'm proud of." Jade leaned her head on his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I married well." They celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a trip back to the city where they had met. The deli was still there, though under new ownership. They sat at the same corner table, older now, no longer the desperate homeless woman and the disconnected billionaire, but partners who had built a life together. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Dominic asked. "You said you were tougher than you looked." "I remember." "I was trying to convince myself as much as you. You were right. You're the toughest person I know, but you are also the kindest, the most compassionate, the most genuine. You're everything I didn't know I needed." "You're everything I never thought I deserved," Jade replied. You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when society had written me off. You loved me when I could offer you nothing but myself. You offered me everything, Dominic said. You offered me truth and authenticity and a reason to be better. You completed me in ways I hadn't even realized I was incomplete. They kissed across the table, and it was just as electric as it had been that first time on the sidewalk outside the hotel. Some things, the best things, only got better with time. That night in their hotel room they talked about the future. Hope was 8 now, Grace was 6, and they were both bright, curious, compassionate children who had never known want, but understood that others did. They volunteered at the outreach program events, helped pack supply boxes, and treated everyone they met with respect regardless of their circumstances. We are raising good humans, Jade said. We are, thanks to you. Thanks to us, she corrected. We are a team, Dominic, we always have been. Best team I have ever been on. They returned home to their daughters and their dog, now gray-muzzled and slow but still devoted. They returned to their work, which was never finished but was always meaningful. They returned to their life, which was imperfect and sometimes messy but was theirs. On a morning 15 years after Dominic had first seen Jade sitting outside his office building, he woke to find her already awake watching him. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Just thinking about how strange life is. How one decision, one moment of compassion can change everything." "You changed everything. We changed everything," she said. "Together." He pulled her close and they lay there in the early morning light, comfortable in the silence that came from knowing each other completely. Outside their window, birds were singing. Downstairs, their daughters were probably already awake, arguing over what to watch on television. Pepper would be sprawled across someone's feet. It was ordinary and beautiful and exactly enough. Dominic Young had built an empire, had wealth beyond measure, had achieved every goal he had set for himself. But his greatest accomplishment was loving Jade Campbell, the woman who had been his complete opposite in circumstance, but his perfect complement in soul. She had taught him that success was meaningless without connection, that wealth was hollow without purpose, that power was worthless without compassion. Together, they had learned that differences don't divide when there is love, that opposites can complete each other in ways that sameness never could, that the barriers society builds between people are nothing compared to the bridges that two hearts can construct. Years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays, and the small moments that make up a life. Hope went to college and studied social work, inspired by her mother's example. Grace followed her father into business but with a focus on ethical practices and fair wages. Both girls grew up understanding that privilege came with responsibility, that they had advantages others didn't, and that meant they had to work harder to level the playing field. Jade's outreach program became a national model, replicated in dozens of cities. She wrote a book about her experiences, not focused on her own story, but on the systemic issues that created homelessness and the practical solutions that could address them. It became required reading in social work programs across the country. Dominic used his platform and resources to push for policy changes. He lobbied for affordable housing initiatives, funded health care access programs, and publicly challenged other wealthy individuals to do more than write tax-deductible checks to feel good about themselves. He made enemies among those who valued profit over people, but he made allies among those who believed business could be a force for good. Through it all, their marriage remained strong. They argued sometimes, because they were both passionate and stubborn, but they always came back to each other. They made each other laugh. They supported each other's dreams. They were partners in every sense of the word. On their 20th anniversary, their daughters threw them a party. It was held at the community center, where they had gotten married, now expanded and serving hundreds of people every week. The guest list was a mix of everyone they had touched over the years, from Dominic's business associates to the people Jade had known on the streets who had since found stability. Speech. Someone called out and Dominic stood, pulling Jade up with him. 20 years ago I was successful but empty, he began. I had everything money could buy but nothing that mattered. Then I met a woman sitting outside my office building, a woman who had lost everything but hadn't lost herself. She taught me what strength really means. She taught me what matters. She taught me how to be human again. He turned to Jade, taking her hands. You are my opposite in 1,000 ways, and that's why we work. Where I'm hard, you're soft. Where you're idealistic, I'm practical. Where I see obstacles, you see opportunities. We balance each other. We complete each other. And I'm grateful every single day that I stopped walking past you and decided to see you instead. Jade was crying, but she was smiling too. I was going to let you do all the talking, but I can't. She addressed the room. Before I met Dominic, I thought I knew what I was worth. Which is to say, I thought I was worth nothing. Society had made that very clear. But this man looked at me and saw value. He saw potential. He saw me. Not what I had lost, not where I had fallen, but who I was underneath all of that. She looked back at him. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. You loved me before I was lovable, when I was dirty and desperate and had nothing to offer. And you never once made me feel like I owed you anything. You just loved me. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. They kissed as the room erupted in applause, and Pepper, now 16 years old and mostly deaf, barked from his bed in the corner, wanting to be part of the celebration. The party lasted late into the night, full of music and dancing and stories. People shared how Jade's program had helped them, how Dominic's initiatives had given them opportunities, how the foundation they had built together had changed lives. It was humbling and affirming, and a reminder that individual actions, multiplied by compassion and resources, could create real change. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Dominic and Jade found themselves alone in the center's courtyard, string lights twinkling above them like stars. "Happy anniversary," Dominic said, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy anniversary," she replied, resting her head against his chest. 20 years. Sometimes it feels like forever, and sometimes it feels like yesterday. Both, always both. You ever think about what would have happened if you had walked past me that day, if you had never stopped? All the time, and I'm terrified by how easy it would have been, how many times I almost did. What made that day different I will never know. Fate, maybe, or luck, or just the universe deciding to do something right for once. "I think you decided to see me," Jade said. "That was a choice." "You make choices like that every day, Dominic. That's who you are. Only because you showed me how." They stood there in the courtyard, two people from different worlds who had found each other against all odds. The homeless woman and the billionaire, whose differences had seemed insurmountable but had instead become the foundation of something beautiful. They had challenged each other, changed each other, and in doing so had created a love that was unshakable. Inside, Hope and Grace were cleaning up, laughing together as they worked. Pepper was asleep in his bed, dreaming whatever old dogs dream about. The community center that had been just an idea in Jade's mind was now a thriving hub of support and hope. The programs they had built were helping thousands of people build better lives. It wasn't perfect. There was still poverty, still homelessness, still inequality. But Dominic and Jade had learned that perfection wasn't the goal. Progress was. And they were making progress, one person, one program, one policy at a time. "What are you thinking?" Jade asked, looking up at him. That I'm the luckiest man alive, that I have everything that matters, that I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I'll love you even more tomorrow. That's very poetic for a pharmaceutical CEO. Former CEO, current husband, father, and professional do-gooder. She laughed, the sound filling the courtyard. I love you, Dominic Young. I love you, Jade Campbell Young. They walked back inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. Because that was the thing about opposites who complement each other. They could face anything as long as they faced it together. Their differences weren't weaknesses to overcome but strengths to celebrate. Where one was lacking, the other was strong. Where one stumbled, the other caught them. Years later, when they were old and gray and their daughters had children of their own, people would ask them the secret to their marriage. They would look at each other and smile, that private smile of two people who shared everything, and they would say the same thing every time. We completed each other. We just didn't know it at first, and it was true. The billionaire with everything and the homeless woman with nothing had found in each other what they had been missing all along. Purpose, connection, love. Their story wasn't about charity or rescue. It was about two people seeing each other truly, accepting each other fully, and choosing each other completely. It was about a man who learned that wealth without compassion was poverty, and a woman who learned that circumstances didn't define worth. It was about building something together that neither could have built alone. It was about love in its truest, most transformative form. Dominic Young and Jade Campbell Young lived long, full lives. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched their daughters become women they were proud of, women who carried forward the values they had worked so hard to instill. They saw their grandchildren grow up in a world that was slightly better because of the work they had done. When Pepper finally passed at the remarkable age of 18, they buried him in their backyard and planted a tree in his memory. He had been there from the beginning, the loyal companion who had stayed with Jade through her darkest days and had welcomed Dominic into their little family. He had a good life, Jade said as they stood by the fresh earth. He had the best life, Dominic agreed, because he had you. They got another dog eventually, a rescue from one of the shelters their program worked with, and then another. Their house was always full of life, of laughter, of love. When Dominic was 65, he retired completely from the pharmaceutical company, selling his shares and using the proceeds to endow the foundation in perpetuity. He wanted to ensure the work would continue long after he and Jade were gone. We are building a legacy, he told her. We are building a better world, she replied. That's the only legacy that matters. They traveled more in their retirement, but still not to luxury destinations. They volunteered at outreach programs in different cities, learning new approaches and bringing them back to implement at home. They spoke at universities and conferences, sharing their story not as a fairy tale, but as a testament to what was possible when people chose compassion over indifference. On their 30th anniversary, they returned once more to the deli, where they had shared their first meal together. It was under new ownership again, modernized and trendy now, but they could still sit at the corner table. 30 years, Jade marveled. We have been together longer than I was alive before I met you. And I was more alive in these 30 years than in all the years before combined. Still poetic, still true. They ordered sandwiches because some traditions were worth maintaining, and they talked about everything and nothing, the way couples who have been together for decades can do. There was comfort in the silence between words, understanding in the glances they exchanged. You have any regrets? Jade asked. Dominic considered the question seriously. I regret that I didn't see you sooner, that I walked past so many people who needed help before I finally opened my eyes. I regret that it took meeting you for me to become the person I should have been all along. That's not a regret. That's growth. You can't blame yourself for not knowing what you hadn't learned yet. What about you? Any regrets? I regret the time I lost to circumstances beyond my control. But I don't regret where it led me. If I hadn't been sitting on that corner, we never would have met. So maybe it all happened exactly as it should have. Maybe. Or maybe we make meaning out of what happens, and that meaning becomes the truth we live by. That's very philosophical for a Thursday afternoon, he grinned. You've made me think more deeply about everything. That's what love does. It expands you. They finished their lunch and walked through the city, past Dominic's old office building, now owned by a different company. The corner where Jade used to sit was occupied by a coffee shop, part of the ongoing gentrification that pushed vulnerable people further to the margins even as it beautified the streets. The work is never done, Jade said quietly, looking at the spot where she had once slept. No. But we have done our part, and we have raised daughters who will continue it, and they will raise children who will carry it forward. Change is generational, Jade. We planted seeds. That's all we can do. I want it to grow faster. I know, me too, but we have done more than most. You have to let yourself celebrate that. She leaned against him, and they stood there on the sidewalk, watching people hurry past, everyone caught up in their own lives, their own struggles, their own joys. So many stories, so many lives, all intersecting and diverging in the great chaos of human existence. I love you, Jade said. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being worth seeing, Dominic replied. Thank you for teaching me how to live. Thank you for choosing me. They walked home slowly, savoring the spring sunshine and each other's company. At home, their current dog, a mixed breed named Lucky, greeted them with enthusiastic tail wags. They made dinner together, moving around the kitchen in the synchronized dance of people who had cooked side by side for decades. That night, lying in bed, Jade said, I want to tell you something I have never told anyone. Okay. When I was on the streets, there were nights I didn't think I would make it to morning. Nights when it was so cold, or I was so hungry, or I was so tired of fighting just to exist. But I would look at Pepper, and he would look at me, and I would think I have to keep going for him. And then you came along, and suddenly I had another reason, and then hope and grace and more reasons. And now I have this whole life full of reasons, and I can't even remember what it felt like to have none. Dominic held her tighter. I'm so glad you kept going. Me too. Because this, everything we have built, it's worth every struggle it took to get here. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the way they had for 30 years, the way they would for however many years they had left. Because that was what it meant to be complete, to fit together so perfectly that being apart felt wrong. Dominic and Jade Young lived to see their daughters happily married, lived to hold grandchildren and even a great-grandchild. They watched the world change, some ways for better, some for worse, but always with the knowledge that they had contributed to the better parts. When Dominic was 78, he got sick. Jade nursed him through treatments and hospital stays with the same devotion he had shown her when she had needed support. They faced his illness together, just as they had faced everything together. I'm not ready to leave you, he told her one difficult night. I'm not ready to let you go, she replied. But we don't get to choose the timeline. We only get to choose how we spend the time we have. Then I choose to spend it loving you. Good. Because I choose the same. He recovered, though slower and more frail than before. They adjusted their lives to accommodate his limitations, but they didn't stop living. They still walked in the park, though shorter distances. They still volunteered, though less frequently. They still loved with the same intensity they always had. On their 40th anniversary, Their family threw them a party at the house. 40 people crowded into the living room and spilled out into the backyard, 3 generations celebrating the love that had started it all. Hope made a toast. My parents taught me that love isn't about finding someone exactly like you. It's about finding someone who balances you, who challenges you, who makes you want to be better. They came from completely different worlds, but they built a new world together, one based on compassion and justice and genuine partnership. That's the example they set for me and Grace, and that's the example we are trying to set for our children. Grace added, "Dad always says Mom saved him and Mom always says Dad saved her. But the truth is they saved each other. That's what real love does. It transforms both people. It creates something larger than either person could be alone. Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. Thank you for showing us what a marriage should look like." Jade and Dominic stood together, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built, and they were overwhelmed with gratitude. This was success. Not the billions in the bank or the company Dominic had built or the programs Jade had created. Those were accomplishments, but this was success. Love that had lasted and grown. Children who were good people. A legacy that would extend far beyond their own lives. "Thank you," Jade said to the room. "All of you, you're the best part of our story." "Actually, you are the best part," Dominic corrected, looking at her. "You always have been." They danced that night in their living room, slowly, carefully, holding each other close. The song playing was the same one from their wedding 40 years earlier, and they remembered every moment of that day as clearly as if it were yesterday. 40 years, Jade whispered. "Not nearly enough," Dominic replied. But it was enough. It had to be enough. Because what they had built together, the love and the life and the legacy, that would last beyond any timeline. Their story would continue in their children and grandchildren, in the programs that bore their names, in the lives they had touched and changed. The homeless woman and the billionaire, complete opposites who had completed each other perfectly. They had proven that differences weren't divisions, that love could bridge any gap, that 2 people with open hearts could change not just their own lives but the world around them. Years from now, when both were gone, people would still tell their story. They would tell it as a reminder that everyone has value, that compassion costs nothing but means everything, that stopping to see someone truly can change 2 lives at once. They would tell it as hope that love can find you anywhere, even on a cold corner with nothing but a dog and cardboard between you and the ground. But for now, Dominic and Jade Young simply held each other and danced in their living room, surrounded by everyone they loved, living proof that the best endings are really just beginnings that found their way home. Their story didn't end with grand gestures or dramatic moments. It ended the way all the best love stories do, with 2 people who chose each other every single day, who built a life of meaning and purpose together, who transformed each other through the simple act of loving completely. They were opposites who complemented each other perfectly, differences that had created something beautiful and whole. And in the end, that was everything.